Giri Govardhan ki jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sri Mayapur Dham ki jai, Sri Jagannath Puri ki jai, Sri Tulsi Devi ki jai, Sri Bhakti Devi ki jai, Sri Ganga Mai ki jai, Sri Yamuna Mai ki jai, Sham Vera Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Pramanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sisi Guru and Sisi Gauranga. Nam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Nami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurvani Pachani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vastatade Shatari. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna to all of you. Please accept my most sincere dandavats at all of your feet. None of us can be appreciative enough for having each other's company in such a place as the Dham of Vrindavan. There is no greater fortune than aspiring for Sangha and service at the lotus feet of the spiritual master and at the lotus feet of the Archa Vigraha residing in this place. Thank you for being here. I had the good fortune of coming to India this time at the request of Radhanath Swami, His Holiness Radhanath Swami. And I always know that when I visit his zone, he's going to trick me and ask me to speak something. And I tell you, it's not my habit very much to speak in public. Even when Srila Prabhupada was on the planet, he used to ask me to speak, and I never really enjoyed that. But I was thinking, before I left Sharanagati in Canada, where I live, what could I do to try to speak, because I'm not even an aspiring Kanishta. And to speak, you should be a madhyam, speak in public. But then I thought, what could I maybe speak on? So it's not my habit to speak Prabhupada Katha so much in public, because it's a very broad subject matter, and Srila Prabhupada can be seen from so many vantage points. So I thought, what could I share with the devotees that is something everyone's interested in, and maybe one little tiny facet that hasn't been spoken very much about Prabhupada, and that was Srila Prabhupada in the kitchen. So we're known as a kitchen religion sometimes. Prabhus, would you please come forward? I'd really like it to be everybody, just so we're all really close together, because it's going to be an interactive discussion, not a talk. Thank you very much. So, I've often divided Srila Prabhupada's presence with us into 3 phases. The first phase is the Adi phase, just like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya appeared and he stayed with his family in Navadvip until he took sannyas. So I always see ISKCON as beginning in 1966, and through the years of 1966 through the years 1970 is the Adi period. That means that ISKCON was a small family, and it was concentrated in a few temples, mostly in North America. In 1969, of course 1969 1968, Srila Prabhupada sent some disciples to Europe to begin to establish a temple there. So then 1970 through 75, I take as the Madhyam period. These are the years that Srila Prabhupada inundated the whole planet with Krishna consciousness. Every country was touched during this period of time. So just as Lord Chaitanya traveled on foot, especially through Bharatvarsha, so Srila Prabhupada brought his disciples on foot to see and experience Krishna consciousness in India. And then the last period, the Antya period, is the years 76 and 77. So it was not until the year 1977 that Srila Prabhupada, by example, went from the Parivrajacacharya platform of sannyas practice to the Paramahansa stage. And he handed over the society primarily to his generals and stalwart leaders on the battlefield. And he retired into another space, as you know. But during that period, even up until 77 Rishikesh, from 1966 until that period, Srila Prabhupada taught by example, didn't he? He never said, you just do this. He showed us how to do this first. So in the one field of cooking, Srila Prabhupada did also like this from the very, very beginning. And by some arrangement of Krishna, just like it's by the arrangement of Krishna that we're all here together, for this one little nanosecond of time, starting from 5 p.m. until we finish, there's some great fortune that we're all together. So there was some fortune that in 1966, Srila Prabhupada was in New York, and my younger sister, whose name was Jan, and she was the first initiated female disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So as all you know, the first initiation was in New York, and there were 11 students, and all of them were men, but my little sister Janki. So she invited me to come to her wedding, and I knew nothing, I didn't even know the word Krishna, or to speak of anything about Krishna. And so I came for that wedding, and there's a rather long story how I met Srila Prabhupada, but somehow or another, he had me in the kitchen the second day I knew him. I was, you know, in India, there's a big tradition for a wedding. Like you had a wedding on 7th February, where Ganga Prasad had a marriage for his daughter. So you saw, some of you, how elaborate that wedding was. So in the first wedding of ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada asked me, he said, well, when are the members of your family coming for the wedding? And I said, I'm the only one. I'm the only one coming from the bride's side. He said, oh, this is most unusual, most unusual. So he said, never mind, we will cook the wedding feast together. So from day 2, first experience was having lunch from Srila Prabhupada's hand on day 1, which he cooked for all of these boys, my sister and myself. And day 2 was first day in the kitchen. So then for some reason, again, unbeknownst to me, over the years, in the next 11 years, off and on I was in Srila Prabhupada's personal service, and a great deal of that service was cooking-related service. So I was thinking how you might all be hungry to know a little bit about some of Prabhupada in the kitchen. Because you've all been taught in various places around the world So let us begin by saying, how many of you have been in the kitchen and tried to cook for Krishna in Krishna consciousness? Raise your hands. How many of you have not done this service? So, a few still. All right, let us begin. Let's say, I think we're representative from all over the planet, the devotees here. So I would like for you all to tell me, to just raise your hands at random, and tell me what you have been taught are some of the most important qualities in cooking for Krishna in Krishna consciousness. Yes. Cleanliness, next. Be on time, next. To please the deity. Right. More? Yes. Devotion. More? Yeah. Not to waste. Good. More, please. Yes. Pardon? Not to taste. Good. That's a rule. Yes. Narayani Prabhu, did you raise your hand? No. Yes. Yes, that's more. What else? Yes. Consciousness enters the food. Anything else? Brahmacharyaji's. Yes. Purity, thank you. Yes. Anyone else? Damodar Swami? What? Pardon? I can't hear you. Could you just say really loudly what? It's covered. Yes. Yes, JV. All right. Yes, one more. Looks is as important as taste. Okay. So those are good things to start with. Every point that was brought up is salient and relevant and is part of the equation. But for the purpose of study, I've whittled it down to three essential things. Three essential things out of all the instructions Srila Prabhupada gave us that are emblematic of cooking for Krishna and Krishna consciousness. And those three things are purity of consciousness, purity, quality, and cleanliness. It's the essence of what Srila Prabhupada taught us in the kitchen. Now, it's sometimes said that what Srila Prabhupada said in the early days, let's say in the Adi period, is not as relevant as what he might have taught in the Madhyam or Antya period. And from some perspectives that may be true if there was a sequence of information. But I can tell you practically that if you were in Srila Prabhupada's service, I can't see you very well, but I'm seeing you from the side. So. Srila Prabhupada taught in such a way that he would give an instruction, and if the disciple digested and understood that instruction, he would go on to another instruction. But if the disciple was a little slow or dull, he might, over a period of time, keep repeating that. Then he also taught in a very individual way. It isn't that he taught every disciple the same thing, say in regards to cleanliness. And I'll try to illustrate that to you through a few stories that happened largely in the Dham, in this holy Dham of Vrindavan. But to begin with, I would like to read to you from a letter that Srila Prabhupada sent to one of his disciples. He was a very early brahmachari. in Los Angeles in 1968. His name was Aniruddha Das. And Aniruddha was a little inclined to serve in the capacity of inside the temple, as a classic brahmachari would ordinarily do. So this is these are portions of that letter written on June 16, 1967. First statement. The main thing is that whatever prasadam is cooked and offered to the Lord, everything should be very respectfully and cleanly prepared and offered. This is the first instruction, the first hint that Prabhupada gives to us. So I ask you, what does respectfully and cleanly mean to you? How do you respectfully cook prasadam, and what have you learned about cleanliness? What is the difference between internal cleanliness and external cleanliness? They're two different things. So what have you been taught to do externally to be clean? What are some of the things? Yes?
Wash your hands constantly.
Thank you, yeah. Wash the hands. What else?
First of all, take bath.
Take bath. Take bath is required for external cleanliness. Clean cloth, yes. Those are the obvious things. And internally, what do we do to be clean before we enter the kitchen?
Not worry about external.
Yes.
Pots should be clean inside and outside.
Ah, that's a wonderful point, yes. Of course, pots must be brilliantly shined. Does anyone in their kitchen have a pot with a black spot on the bottom? Who has a black spot on the bottom of one of their pots? Everyone should raise their hand. So Prabhupada said only the lowest class person will allow a black spot on the bottom of their pots. Very difficult instruction, but that's part of the cleanliness aspect. So yes, first thing is cleanliness. Absolutely. But now, okay, so we've talked a little bit externally. What do we do internally to be clean? JP? Offer obeisances. Cooking for Krishna's pleasure. Yes.
What says that everything that one does should be accompanied by chanting the Hare Krishna.
That's the most important thing. I'll tell you, in 1967, oh, excuse me, 68, Prabhupada came back from India in December of 67 to San Francisco, and we moved him from his Willard Street apartment above the temple on Willard Street, 512. Up to Frederick Street to Willard Street, the Willard Street apartment. And at that time, Gaur Sundar and Govinda were chosen to be their secretary and servant. And Govinda Dasi didn't know how to type, and Srila Prabhupada wanted her to type the manuscripts that he was working on for TLC. Some preliminary, and for Gaur Sundar to work on Bengali. And so she asked Prabhupada, well, I don't type, so I don't know if I can help you. Prabhupada said, you can learn to type. She said, I'm not inclined in that way. He said, a devotee can learn to do anything if they, before they begin to engage in a service, repeat this. Let's say it together. Om Jnanam Timirandasya Jnananjana Sakalaya Chaksurmilitam Jnanam Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam From this instruction, this is the first, really the first one that all of us can engage in on a regular basis for the rest of our lives. Every time we think of going across the threshold into the kitchen for the purpose of internal cleanliness and for the purpose of preparing ourselves to cook for the pleasure of the Lord. These words are so very, very powerful. They are our invocation of purification. And they were given to us in 1967 by Srila Prabhupada, long before we had a songbook, or before we knew the words to Mangalacharana, or before we knew the words to almost anything but the Maha Mantra. So that's for internal purification. And ever since I've done that before, no matter where I am, if I'm in a kitchen in the middle of a field, collecting cow dung and trying to cook over an open fire, or if I'm in a marble kitchen, or if I'm in a temple, I always say these prayers. So that's the first aspect. Thank you, that's very good. Any points on that cleanliness, external and internal? It can go much more complex than that, but those are some of the basics. Yes, Prabhu? I think you're going to have to speak very loudly. The kitchen is no different. In the beginning, of course, without second initiation, then there's the assisting phase, so that means not over the fire. But anyone who's over the fire, of course, this is deity worship. This is another facet of worshiping the deity. So you study the procedures at a temple like Radha Damodar temple or Jagannath Puri or such. Very, very elaborate rules for cleanliness beforehand. In Jagannath Puri, for example, before a cook is allowed to prepare, the scale there is so gigantic in Puri. There are over 571 chulas, that means stoves, mud stoves that are used. 10,000 persons can be engaged in cooking at one time. That means 5,000 over the stoves, and 3,000 first string assistants and 2,000 second string assistants. And before they cook over, not only do they put on clean cloth, and they wrap that cloth all the way around their heads, so only their eyes are showing, because they don't want to let any perspiration come. Very hot in this kitchen, no air conditioning. And they eat a full meal before they go into the kitchen, so there's no hunger. There's no thought of enjoying before Krishna takes. Just so the senses are pointedly only in the service of Lord Jagannath. So there's different standards of this in many different temples, different traditions. But we're discussing those traditions that have been given to us by our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Okay. Second instruction is, to finish up the first one, he says, everything should be prepared in a clean and pure manner. Well, there's so many things in terms of that could be brought up about clean and pure. Now he's brought in this purity aspect in this sentence. First it was respectful and clean, now it's clean and pure in second sense. Next instruction, one should wash one's hands before cooking. So there's very shortly and brief, I can tell the story of this day 2 when I was cooking for Srila Prabhupada. The scene is a Lower East Side apartment, second floor. I am wearing what's called a mini skirt. That means it's a very short skirt up here and a little tank t-shirt. And I come in to knock on Swamiji's door and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you've come to help cook. Please come in to the apartment." So as I'm going into the apartment, just to the right is what's called a galley kitchen. A galley kitchen in kitchen design terms. And maybe sugar. So that's what we used in Krishna's service in '67. Again, the fruits and vegetables, we'd get sometimes the most bruised vegetables that we could in big, or what was later in London, it was donated things, going a little bit off. So it's really year by year by year that we're understanding the importance of the distribution of funds for the pleasure of Krishna. So at that time there was probably money that we had that we withered away in something that we could have used to get something better, but we didn't have the consciousness. So Prabhupada gave us a hint in '68 where we're supposed to go. And we can only go higher and higher as the years go on. But unless we live, this is important, Prabhupada's words are there. We have his example. It's not enough to just talk about, oh, what Prabhupada did. It's not enough for devotees to sit up and have katha about the good old days. It's up to each and every one of us to make today the best day and be connected with Prabhupada by following his instructions, trying to live his instructions, trying to share his instructions, trying to taste the joy and the thrill and the inspiration of those instructions. So something as simple as this, you just, simple words, you get the best you can. So that means with your consciousness, with your money, with your words. That's it. And it's interesting, if you really go on a quest, and I've spent a little time in this area, and attention, I found, really there's amazing things that are available for the pleasure of Krishna. And so in our ashram, we try to, we live with a very small budget in our ashram, not a wealthy ashram. And but we try to get the best we can for Krishna with that. Try to put those funds there, because it was Prabhupada's instruction. Not that we have always organic to offer, but we try. Yes, Damodar Maharaj.
To what extent could you offer things that have been already cooked? I mean, there's puffed rice, there's potato chips, there's white cereals. Did Prabhupada say anything about this?
On several occasions, he spoke to devotees in different capacities. There's numerous stories and numerous instructions. To some degree, especially when I talked with other cooks that were engaged in Prabhupada's service over the years, there were different examples of what they said Prabhupada liked or accepted. In general, Prabhupada, once a devotee asked Prabhupada, what do you like the most? What do you like the most? Prabhupada said, I like anything that is well prepared and cooked in Krishna consciousness. So it wasn't necessarily, although he had a taste for Bengali food because he was from a Bengali family. So he loved certain things, kachoris and shukta and singhar, certain things that he grew up tasting. But he also loved he said anything that's well prepared, he also appreciated. So for example, in India, puffed rice, the rice is handled in a certain way and then roasted in hot sand. And it blows up. So he said, my mother used to make this, and as early as 69, he said, "Can you make puffed rice?" I said, "Well, you can learn." But whether it's, Barbara's organic puffed rice or Quaker's puffed rice or whatever puffed rice you have in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, or the Ukraine, some things he accepted. For example, oats. We have whole grains, and then we have grains that we can puff or we can soak and flatten, or even poha. You see, that's been a little bit recooked. So there were certain things that are acceptable, Prabhupada said, that have been slightly prepared. But that sour cream that we used in 69, then sometime later he said, you shouldn't use that. So they were off and on different instructions. What we're dealing about today is what I call principles. Details, Prabhupada gave different instructions about many different ingredients to different devotees. So it's not so important, those details. What is important, I believe, is that whatever temple you live in, you get together and you set a standard for the pleasure of the Archa Vigraha under the instructions of your spiritual master. And then you follow that. So it may be that some temple that's in another country will follow a little bit different. And that's okay. But we want to establish a standard for the pleasure of the Lord, again with the intent for the pleasure of the Lord, of what kind of ingredients we'll use and what ingredients we're open to using. For example, I never